Welcome back to the Your Most Interesting Story podcast. I'm Rob, and each episode we hear about and dig into the most interesting thing that's happened to someone in their life. These are first-hand, true stories told by the people who experienced them. Today's episode features a practiced storyteller, as podcasting veteran Bob LeMent tells us about some things that he and his family experienced in a very unlikely to be haunted house. Let's hear Bob's most interesting story.
My house burnt down in 2019. Literally within a half an hour, I left my house to get some food. And then we all came back and the house was burning down.
Oh, good Lord.
Which was fantastic. One of these life experiences that everyone should have, right?
Man.
Now, the terrible part about that, besides losing all your possessions, is the fact that I made fun of it because I'm like, oh, there's smoke. I hope that's not our house on fire.
Oh.
I have done that all my life. Anytime there's smoke and you're driving towards home, I'm like, oh, I hope that's not our house. And now this time it was. I'm like, oh my God, this is horrible, right? The other thing that was horrible about this experience, not that the whole thing wasn't, is that as soon as I get there, the sheriff or the deputy, I can't remember which was which, comes right up to me and says, did you burn down your house?
When a family returns to their home to find it on fire, law enforcement officers are trained to interact with empathy. They're told to offer support to help manage the shock and emotions of the family, and they may decide to contact additional resources like victim services or counselors to assist. That was his first question?
That was his first question. Well, actually, I think his first question was, do you own this house? And I go, yeah. He goes, did you burn it down? I'm like, no. Why the hell would I do that? All my stuff's in there. And then he walked away. That was fantastic. But that fuels what happens next. We have to find a place to live. Being kind of an average, everyday kind of Joe or Bob, as the case may be, you take these things for granted. And so then we went straight to a hotel for the night. And then we actually stayed in a hotel for about a month. And insurance, thankfully I had insurance. And so then you only get so much money. And so we realized as we were staying in the hotel for a while, we're like, this money's going to run out in probably about 4 months if we don't figure this out. And so we ended up renting a house, which was much cheaper. And it was in a community that was by a golf course, which is a little more highfalutin than where I live, with the house that burnt down. But it was really the only thing we could find at that time. So we were living in what was kind of like a McMansion light, if you will. And this was a house that was probably built in the 90s, maybe the late 90s. I don't know. But it had all the things that the happy homemaker would want. You had a dining room and a eating kitchen and a open floor plan and 3 bedrooms and all the works, right? So it is not a house that you would think would be haunted.
Paranormal and ghost hunting enthusiasts believe that certain characteristics can increase the likelihood of a house being haunted. These include a history of tragedy or violence, the house being old, previous occupants having engaged in occult practices, it being in a remote or isolated location, or having cemeteries or burial grounds nearby.
So we show up with very little stuff. We tried not to accumulate things because everything was gone. So all we had were clothes on our backs and what we had in our pockets. And when we stayed for the month at the hotel, we did accumulate some clothes and so forth, but not a lot of stuff. So we show up with a couple laundry baskets full of things to this rental house to move in, and there's nothing in it. It's empty. There's no furniture or anything. My wife is a very good planning person, and she literally had Amazon delivering mattresses in boxes and frames and some chairs to sit in on the day we moved in. So everything just showed up while we were waiting there. That first day, we showed up, and then the Amazon people showed up with all this stuff. And I spent the good part of a day putting together beds and a couple of office chairs was what our furniture consisted of at that point. And in this, what I would consider, if you're looking at it from the outside, quite a fairly nice house. We weren't on the golf course itself. We were across the street from the golf course. And it was very nice. And so we get everything done. And the neighbors came over and said hi. Oh, I'm so sorry your house burnt down. Everybody already knew. I don't know how that happens because I don't talk to anybody, but apparently somebody did. And they're like, well, we're so sorry. And one of the neighbors was kind of like a car salesman-y kind of guy, wants to shake your hand and it slaps you on the back. Oh, man, that kind of faux empathy where he's like, oh, your house burnt down. I'm so sorry. And it's like, he's not sorry. He doesn't care. I'm just a distraction because his wife said, come with me and talk to the new neighbors, So he was just not my type of person necessarily. So we do all that. And then I'm exhausted. I mean, you're exhausted from these kind of things. Even a month after staying in the hotel and moving into some place with nothing is exhausting physically and emotionally. And having to build all this stuff is weird.
Periods of extended emotional stress trigger the release of stress hormones, which keep the body in a heightened state of alertness, leading to physical fatigue. The brain, which is a major consumer of energy, is tasked with increased mental processing, further depleting energy stores. In addition, constantly managing complex emotions, perhaps the ones that might come into play when your family's house burns down, drains mental energy and also contributes to overall physical tiredness.
So we go to bed fairly early, and somewhere around, I have no idea what time it was. I'm assuming it was the middle of the night. I wake up, and where the bed was, there was a window on the opposite side from me. My wife was near the window. I was on the other side of her. I look, and it looks like there's a shadow of a person swaying back and forth outside because all we had was the blind. There was no curtains or anything. So it was just like those stupid, cheap blinds. And I'm like, oh my God, that weird neighbor, the car dealer guy, is out there looking in our window. But I was so tired that I just went back to sleep. I'm like, oh, screw it. He can stand out there and look in the window all he wants. We're sleeping. I can't do anything about it. So I go to sleep. The next morning, my son comes up to me and he says, Dad, a shadow came through my door and tried to grab my leg. He was a teenager, mid-teenager. I don't know what you call it, like 16 years old, 17 years old. And he was a little bit freaked out by it because this thing tried to grab him. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Because I realized when he said that I saw what he saw. I saw the shadow.
Ooh, I hate to interrupt here, but this is the perfect time to share that during a conversation I had with Bob after we recorded the show, he tossed out the idea of me finding some random clip of something that he'd said during the interview and turning it into a song. Not one to back away from a creative challenge, that's what I did. I'll play a little bit of it here, but I'll also provide a link in the show notes in case you want to hear the whole thing.
I saw what he saw. I saw what he saw. I saw what he saw. I saw the shadow.
Anyway, as Bob was saying and singing, he realized that both he and his son had seen the same shadow. Now, back to the show.
That's what's going through my mind. And I'm also thinking, in the current situation, we have nowhere else to go. We had a hard enough time finding this house. At that time, the market was such that to get like a 3-bedroom kind of thing was just impossible almost. We didn't even live anywhere near where our house was. We lived about, I think it was about 25, 30 minutes away. I'm like, there I'm a jerk, right? Oh, I'm sure it was nothing. You're just tired. We had gotten him an iPad to do stuff in the interim. So he was staying up late. He's a teenager. They just stay up all hours.
Oh, so he was awake.
Yeah, he was away. He was playing games or something.
Interesting. Okay. Nighttime hallucinations, where people report seeing figures, feeling pressure, or sensing an intruder, are often linked to a phenomenon called sleep paralysis. This occurs when a person is conscious but temporarily unable to move or speak, usually as they are falling asleep or waking up. During this state, the brain can project vivid, dreamlike images while the body remains immobilized. Many people believe that such experiences explain a significant number of reported paranormal encounters, as the combination of hallucinations and paralysis can create the illusion of supernatural events.
Totally awake, yeah. Totally awake with the light on. And I go, just, if it happens again, let me know. It's like, I'm like condescending, horrible father here. But I didn't know what else to do because I was worried that if I go, yeah, I saw that too, but I didn't think anything of it. That now we have a certain situation, right? And so I brushed him off, knowing full well that something happened because it happened in our room and then it happened in his room.
So when you first saw the figure, any chance that you were experiencing sleep paralysis?
No, I stuck my head up. I was looking and I was trying to decide. I mean, if you've ever been in a weird situation where you're trying to figure something out and you can't figure it out,
Right.
because you're groggy or it just looks weird. It was kind of like that. And I looked at it for a while.
Were you tilting your head to the side like a quizzical dog?
Yeah, I'm Nipper from RCA. I made up this whole story in my own head. Oh, that's the weird neighbor standing outside my window.
Sleepy rationalization.
Right? Something like that. So then I tell my son this, I brush him off, and then I don't talk about it. I did not talk about this for a year until we moved out of that house. To anybody, my wife or anybody, it was my secret to keep because more things happened. The house had a basement. The basement was not finished. The only thing in the basement was the hot water heater, the furnace, and as we accumulated things, so we eventually got, some furniture and some other stuff, some boxes, because we knew we were going to have to move back out. So anything that came in, we kept the boxes down there. And we'd be milling about and you would hear noises in the basement, like something's down there.
So what was the family conversation at this point when you're all hearing noises coming from the supposedly empty basement?
It was noted, and I'm like, oh, I'm sure it's just pipes or something. I was playing everything off. I'm like the bad guy in this whole scenario because everything that anybody said, I would play it off. I was the debunker, although I was totally a believer. It wasn't a hard job, to be honest with you. We're not super believers on this side, right? We're the skeptics. It wasn't like I was, oh my gosh, it's going to be a shadow thing. That was not in my head. I've seen stuff about it. I've read, and I kind of like that aspect of things. I'll watch the shows and everything and debunk them from my armchair quarterback kind of a situation, right? And then I have this very real experience. So then my son come to me a week or so later. He's like, Dad, I saw it again. I saw a shadow and it walked through the kitchen out into the garage. He was coming out to get something to eat in the middle of the night. And this thing was walking around the house. Again, I'm sure it's nothing.
As these events were unfolding, Bob noticed something that implied his family may not be the first ones to experience strange happenings in the house. A previous occupant had apparently wanted to know whenever someone or something was going into or coming out of the sometimes unexplainably noisy basement.
There was a bell on a string so that if you opened that door, it rang.
Did you ever hear the bell ring when nobody in your family was near the door?
I never did, but it was creepy, right? After this happens right away when we got there, I'm starting to notice weird things.
So how did Mr. Debunker explain away the bell?
Everybody would say, "Oh, that's weird," and I'm like, who knows why they have that there. The other thing that happened a little bit later is we had lost pets in the fire, and so we wanted to get a dog. So we got a dog, and one of the things we used to do was go down in the basement with the dog and throw a tennis ball around because it's this big concrete room. The interesting thing is that this one corner of the basement, if the ball rolled into that and did not come back out, the dog would not go get it.
Some paranormal experts suggest that dogs may have heightened senses that allow them to detect things beyond human perception, such as spirits, energy fields, or even changes in atmospheric pressure. They believe that a dog's keen sense of hearing and smell, as well as their ability to sense subtle vibrations, could make them more attuned to supernatural occurrences.
But every other place in the basement, the dog would get the ball. It was rabid for this ball. It would just run everywhere, having a great time. But if, it bounced around and kind of ended up in that corner, wouldn't go get it.
Did you go get it, or were there a bunch of tennis balls piled up in that corner of the basement?
Oh, yeah, I went over and got it. It was during the day, and there's nothing there. But I thought that was odd behavior because, literally this dog would go anywhere else in the basement, and he'd run through the boxes and knock them all over. And it would get him, if it fell into a box, he'd jump in there and get him. And so, yeah, just this one back corner, no way, he's not going to go get the ball. Now, my son, I think, saw it one more time out in the kind of the main area. It's like an open floor plan. So the living room, kitchen, breakfast nook thing all kind of opened up together. And it would be out in there. So we lived with it. And then it slowly receded into the background, as it were. All the noises and stuff happened kind of on our front end of our stay. And on the back end of our stay, there really wasn't much happening. There was no lights turning off and on. There was no radios turning off and on. Nothing like that. It was as if we lived in this house with another entity, the silent roommate, and they would just pop in, mostly at night, obviously. I never saw anything during the day, and just be in different areas, mostly in areas that we weren't in. And so I'd like to think that it was just checking us out. Well, who are these people in my house? And then after that, okay, well, I'll be hanging out. I'll be downstairs. I'll be here. I'll be there. Never really interacted that much after that. And we kind of had a fairly peaceful existence. I worried about it. I was waiting to wake up with it, like stare into my face or something. Everybody from all these shows loves to talk about so many people died on this spot. There was a battle. This was Gettysburg. There's all these dead soldiers. If somebody died in this house, I'd be very surprised. This is a new house. Newer house, not 20 years old or whatever. It's not like it's some kind of old, decrepit place that's got water dripping down the walls or anything. This is a very new build. And it goes against everything that you always see on all these shows. And yet, I saw it. I know my son saw it. My wife never did see it. She heard the noises and would constantly be talking about, what could that be? And I was just constantly playing these things off.
So what do you know about the house?
I can tell you that the house was a rental, and it had been a rental, and the people who were there previously only stayed a year. And then the people after us only stayed a year, and then they sold it to somebody. And I don't know what's happened to them after that, but it changed hands, seems like quite a bit during that time period. So I don't know if people had the same experiences or what, and I haven't tried to contact anybody about it. To be honest with you, this experience has really scared me on this kind of investigation. I really don't want to know. And then after we moved out, I finally revealed it to my wife and to my son. I apologized. I said, I'm sorry. I was holding this back, but you did see something. Everybody's so mad at me, but I don't know what else I could have done. If I would have kind of went, oh my gosh, I saw this shadow person, it would have been really tough to keep everybody there, and there was no place else for us to go. How am I going to go to the insurance company? Well, there's a ghost or something in this house. I can't stay here. And they're going to be like, what? My wife's still mad at me. I mentioned that I was going to talk about this tonight. She's still angry with me. She's like, yeah, you're a jerk. You didn't even tell me. And it was on her side of the bed. So she's just like, oh, you're such a jerk. She's like, never do that again. And I go, well, do you want me to tell you? And then you just basically be freaked out the whole time we're in this house?
Bob may readily talk and joke about what he and his family experienced in that house, but it isn't all fun and games. It affected him. Bob has his own podcast where he and his co-host Miles discuss what goes on in each other's lives each week. But this topic didn't come up until years after they'd moved out of the house. There seems to be a part of Bob that wants to store those memories away into some seldom visited corner of his mind's basement. Speaking of which, how much money would it take for you to spend a night in that corner of the basement by yourself?
I probably wouldn't. No, going to that place and spending the night, yeah, I don't think that I would. I mean, if you had a lot of money, I'd...
10 years of salary for one night?
Yeah, I'd do that. Sure. You want to do 10 years of my salary for that? Yeah.
5?
Maybe. Like a year, 2 years? Nah, forget it. I don't. That's why I never really looked into anything else there. I don't want to know.
And that's going to bring Bob LeMent's story to an end. Bob is a co-host of Static Radio at staticradio.com, which has been producing internet radio and podcast episodes since 1999. If you like off-kilter and sophomoric ramblings, well, they've got you covered, and I'll put a link to their site in this episode's show notes. Remember that you can visit YMIS Podcast on Instagram for pics related to this and every episode. And we'd love to hear from you. We've got a number of ways you can contact the show. Our website, which is also linked to in the show notes, is a great place to find out how. Your Most Interesting Story is available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube. If you like the show, we love 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts, but you can also like, rate, review, share, and or subscribe on any podcast platform you prefer, or you could buy us a coffee. If you want to tell us your most interesting story, we'd love to have you. Follow the link to our website in our show description. Until next time, be interesting.
I would certainly not want to be ghost kissed. It's like they're hovering over my head, burping in my ear.